we know that you're going to be a success. You're going to continue farming. Now we'll go to Shelby County and listen to Mr. Ken Waters talk about his farm.
Hello, I'm Ken Waters from Shelby County, and they tell me this might be a success story. Do you have the video coming up? I can tell you a little background here. I got to go, I was encouraged to go to the 2008 Southern Agriculture Working Group Conference in Louisville, and I took the special, they had a little course on high tunnels presented by Allison and Paul Wiedeker, and I took that, and it was exciting. I've always enjoyed growing things, and the idea of waiting to get things in the ground in the spring was just, sometimes it was overwhelming. So I had to do one of these. I actually met Dr. Marion Simon there and been to many of her Third Thursday presentations. And she introduced me to Dr. Mike Bomford, and he's been an inspiration to me. I got to go with him to actually visit the high tunnels that the Wiedekers had in Smiths Grove, Kentucky, and I was really taken with it. I had to do it. So I ordered a kit from Atlas Manufacturing, and I got the one with the extended sides because everyone said you want to make sure you get lots of ventilation in the summer. They are hotter than they are outside. So actually this is aptly named because it was 14 feet tall at the center, and so I had to come up with some interesting ways of constructing it. Not safety first, safety third. And then I built the end walls, and there I was fortunate enough to have a tornado blow a barn down and left me with a lot of full dimension lumber. And I was able to use that to construct the wood parts of the high tunnel. And I did mine a little different than most people do. I actually put wood on the ends and covered the inside and the outside with separate sheets of plastic. Here's looking down one side, and I aimed it north-south, or very close to north-south, so that I could take advantage of the prevailing wind, which is mostly from the west. And it gives a good flow through in the summer, helps cool it off. And the other side, and got it covered on the 3rd of January in 2009, and it was soaking wet inside because it had rained and rained and rained, and I had to wait for about a month for it to dry out, and started laying out some of my rows. And I don't know how many people do this, but I did it a little different. I actually made some permanent rows, 7 rows. My high tunnel's 30 feet wide, so I did 30-inch rows on each side, and then 5 40-inch rows across the center, and 16-inch walkways. And I've strung a string, and I've told the leaves not to grow out within 8 inches of that string, because if they did, we were going to step on them. And but it's worked out well because all the soil compaction takes place right in that one place. And the ground gets really hard, but the other soil never gets compacted. It didn't get any hard rain and didn't get any foot traffic. There it is on the 15th. I had already planted a bunch of things, and I made a separate little tunnel inside for tomatoes. So knowing I was going to do this, I started tomatoes really, really early, like Christmas time or something. And I could roll the sides down on this thing, but then I could roll them up on warm days and see, you might see some of the big candles. I had candles all down through the thing where I could light them on really cold nights. And you can see some other things starting to sprout there. A week later, things, this was in early February or mid-February, but the sun is warm. The air's still cool, but the sun is strong, and so things just really take off growing. This is 2 weeks later, and you can see I have the side rolled up a little bit so I can get some ventilation. Even on cold days, if it was 32 outside, it could get to be 100 inside very easily, and even more a little bit later in the season. There's March the 17th. You can see I've got the little trickle tubes in place, and I'm irrigating it, and it was so neat to be able to grow things so early. Got my tomatoes planted, the regular ones on a Florida trellis. That's what all that string and uprights are. I only allow 2 growing tips on each tomato plant, so that cuts down on the foliage a lot, and I grow them straight up through those strings, and that keeps them under control a little bit. There's the first ripe tomato, March the 24th. That's the earliest I've ever had a ripe tomato. Mike Bomford took a better picture of it. I wish I could do that again. There's some of you can see I've got the beds laid out in the walkways, and some spinach growing and some onions, and you have to take advantage of the space. I mean, the space is coming at a premium, and so if some sun hits the ground, you made a mistake. You really want things densely planted, not so much that they can't compete, but nevertheless, you don't want to waste a lot of space. There's March the 26th, and you can see lettuce, and my gosh, I had so many things planted in some of those rows. That one light green row was carrot. I had planted 2 rows of carrots, 2 rows of beets, and in between, 6 inches, those were a foot apart. In between, I had lettuce that came out early, and I had bushels of lettuce I took out before the carrots and the beets were ever interfered with. There's April the 1st. We're still growing. Sides rolled up even higher. Here's the other side. My tomatoes are starting up the trellis. And I put this in. Look how big that radish is. In a high tunnel, things grow differently. And if I grew a radish that big outdoors, it wouldn't be worth picking. And that was just as tender and sweet as you'd ever have a radish. There's April the 9th, and some chard and some onions, and things grow different. They grow taller. They grow lusher. They don't have strings in the stems. They don't have any beating rain or wind to deal with, and so they don't form large strands in the stems. They're very, especially a vegetable where you're eating the stem, it's nice if it doesn't have all that strandy stuff in it. There's April the 28th, and see the peas climbing up on the left, and stuff is growing. I want you to notice there's a row, see that center row? Now, I was rooting some tomatoes where I'd taken suckers off and rooting them in between, but those 4 rows are asparagus that I planted from seed. And I planted them very early. Asparagus, if you've ever grown it from seed, it's very slow starting out. But I'd put it in about as early as any of those other things, early February. And there's June the 28th, and you can see the asparagus growing. The tomatoes on the right side there are way up over my head. You would never believe how many pounds of vegetables I've taken out of this thing just the first season. There's the asparagus. It's growing. And there's a close-up of the crowns. They're actually coming along pretty well. There's June the 21st. Nobody outside had any tomatoes yet. And I've been picking them for a couple of weeks, and they were at that, there's that time when the tomatoes you get a few, and then all of a sudden the main crop is there. Well, the main crop hit 3rd week of June. And I was selling tomatoes for $3 a pound. I felt like a highway robber. And nobody was complaining. I mean, I sold them every time I took them. They were gone. Now, this is the asparagus at the end of the season. I say it's the end of the season because if you're going to transplant it into permanent beds, you need to do it early enough where it has some time to take before the winter burn down. And I grew on that one row. That row was 40 inches wide, 90 feet long approximately. The whole house is 96 feet. I grew 1,200 crowns of asparagus. There's some of the close-up of them. But look, see the yardstick down between the bottom two? I mean, they were huge. Much higher quality than I could have bought if I'd bought them from a dormant from a place. And, you know, there wasn't much doubt whether they were going to live. They were alive, and they were growing rapidly. This was the next year and just getting things going. It's so neat. I've never had the experience to be able to garden in the winter, but there isn't a day go by in the winter. I might have to walk through the snow, but I can go out and pick several kinds of kale and spinach and chard and lettuce and, I mean, it's beets, carrots. Those things really like the cold weather. They grow so much better in the cold weather than they do in our summer weather. You know, you plant carrots very early in the spring. By the time they're coming in, you're up in some hot weather. They don't like hot weather. I had carrots a foot long and some of them approaching 2 inches in diameter from the high tunnel. They were extremely sweet. And they were tender. You cook them just a little bit, and they were just as tender as they could be. I couldn't possibly grow those outdoors. There's, well, I just threw some extra slides in here so I could show you that, I mean, things, there's Bibb lettuce. And as we were picking them, I was replacing them with younger ones. I have a heated greenhouse that I use to start all my plants. And, that, you know, I was just filling in the spaces as I would take something out. Things are growing fast, and they really do. Look at that cauliflower. That's the biggest cauliflower I've ever seen. And the flavor was just, I mean, it was so mild. It was just wonderful. There's a carrot, you know. If I grew that carrot outdoors, it would be woody in the center. Sugar snap peas. That I haven't done that, repeated that, because even though the snap peas grew fast, they didn't look just right. I couldn't sell them. I couldn't market them. The peas were great and they tasted good, but they had some kind of discoloration on the pods. Rapid growth. There's March the 8th of 2011. And I'm not real sure what those are. Some of them might be turnips. I mean, anything that'll take the cool, I try to grow in there. The tomatoes have landed. Last year, I was able to plant tomatoes on the 9th of March. Got that close to having them freeze out. Mighty close. It was 31 degrees in the high tunnel night before last and 33 last night. So it still gets cold. But it doesn't get as cold as it gets outside. There's no wind, and it's not cold for very long. Big difference. Plus, even though it was 31 degrees, the soil was still about 50 degrees, and that was radiating to the plants. So it's not like 31 outdoors. This year, I was able to get the tomatoes in on the 7th of March. There's March the 7th of this year, and I just put the tomatoes in. And that's the end of my presentation. There was one slide, and I don't know how it escaped me, because I've gotten teased about this. I'm off at such an angle I can barely see it. You see that Adirondack chair? If you've never been in a high tunnel on a cold, blustery day when it's sunny, you haven't lived. Because I could sit down in that chair and close my eyes, and I might as well have been sitting on an ocean beach. It felt that good. Thank you all.